we are at the short game area. We're going to talk to the guys a little bit about the short game, and I think people need to realize how important the short game really is. I'd say probably 60 to 80% of the game for most people is the short game. What do you think about that?
I think that's correct. Where do most amateurs and junior golfers and even some professionals spend their time erroneously when they're out practicing?
Yeah, mostly around the greens. You know, I'd say, let's describe the short game for the viewers. I'd say probably 100 yards in. That's a pretty good indication of when we're using the scoring clubs. And that's really what we're talking about when we're talking about the short game. We're talking about our scoring opportunities, right?
Absolutely. When we're trying to play any game, especially a game where we're trying to put the ball in the hole or in the goal at the end, getting the ball in is obviously the most important thing. And a lot of people want to gloss over that and go straight into the full swing and skip over the most important part of the game, and that is the short game.
Okay, well, let's do this for the viewers today. Let's try to keep it very, very simple. I don't want to get it complicated. We have 3 rules that you and I use with all of our students when we're talking about the short game. Rule number 1.
Putt it if you can putt it.
In other words, no matter where you are, on or off the green, if you can use your putter, you should use it.
Why would we choose to use a putter whenever we can?
Exactly. It's the simplest, easiest stroke in golf, supposedly.
Supposedly.
And it really is if you learn to do it right, but the putter allows us an opportunity to make mistakes and still get the ball close. So putting the ball whenever you can putt the ball is rule number 1 with our rules. Rule number 2?
Chip, if we can't putt it, then we're going to chip it with a club other than a putter.
And we're going to use with that club the least amount of loft we possibly can.
Right.
So in other words, we're in a situation where we can't putt the ball. Rule number 1 is out of play. Rule number 2 is when you can't putt it, you chip it using the least amount of loft as possible. Just enough loft to get the ball on the green and let it roll, because once it gets on the green, it's just a putt.
Right.
All right. And how about rule 3?
Rule 3 is as a last resort, we're going to pitch the ball.
And when you say pitch the ball, what do you mean by pitch the ball?
Well, the difference between a pitch shot and a chip shot is simple. A chip shot is going to roll farther than it flies, and a pitch shot is going to fly farther than it rolls. So if I hit a pitch shot, that means I'm going to be forced to carry the ball a greater distance than it's actually going to roll out.
Okay, so when we're talking about chipping and pitching, then it sounds to me like there's a few different mechanics that we'll talk about later, but the 2 shots aren't the same.
No, sir, they're not.
When we start talking about a ball carrying farther than it rolls, I guess the problem there would be we don't know how the ball is going to react when it gets on the ground. Whereas a ball that's on the ground rolling, we know what it's going to do. It's
and
going to roll.
Not only that, when we're trying to produce that shot that flies farther than it rolls, we're forced to use a club with greater loft, and that then forces us to make a bigger golf swing, which, as we all know, the bigger the swing, the harder it is to repeat.
Excellent. So putt when you can putt it. When you can't putt, chip, use the least amount of loft as possible, and pitch the ball only if there's no other resort. And most of the time, there's another way.
I like it.
All right, let's start with the putting. That's going to be the simplest, okay? Before we start actually talking about the putting as far as the perfect mechanics and all, let's talk about what it takes to make a putt. What 2 things have to be present for a ball to actually roll into the hole?
Well, I think it's 2 pretty simple things. A lot of times people really go into depth about what it takes to make a putt, but in reality, all it takes is you got to hit the ball the right distance, and you've got to hit it the right direction.
Okay, so if I'm hearing you right, line and speed.
Line and speed.
And let's just let's give our viewers a show of that. For example, let me just grab a ball here. Let's walk over here to a hole, and we'll pull the pin, because when you're on the green, you're supposed to putt with the pin out. So I'm going to take this over here and put it out of our way. But for us to make this putt, the first thing we need is we got to get it on the right line. So if I'm looking at this from here, and if we're viewing it from back here, looking down the line, this ball looks pretty straight. So for us to get it in the hole, you've got to get it on the right line.
Right.
If you putt it, in other words, at my foot, what's going to happen?
It's going to go to the right.
Putt it to my foot. We'll just show people. This is very simple. That ball didn't go in the hole because it wasn't aimed at the hole. So for us to make this ball go into the hole, it's necessary for us to make sure that we get it rolling on the line towards the hole. Go ahead and putt one on the right line this time. Good. Now, let's say that we pick the line out properly. We're going to put this ball right here for a second, but the speed is wrong. Okay, so let's say you pick out the right line, but maybe you don't hit it hard enough. What happens? The ball winds up staying short of the hole. So even on the right line, it still doesn't have a chance. So a lot of people think, well, I'll just hit it harder, but too much speed results in the same thing. So for this ball to go into the hole, we have to have, now that we've chosen the correct line, we have to have the correct speed as well. There you have it. So line and speed are very important. Now, 2 things affect line and speed. What are they?
Well, the line obviously would be where you're going to aim. And, you know, when you talk about where you're going to aim, you've got to find a way to do that. But when you skip over mechanics, two general things that affect how a ball rolls and how fast it rolls are the slope of the green. Is it uphill? Is it downhill? Is it sloped to the side? Or what is the grain of the grass doing? What is the grain of the grass? Is the grass growing into us? Is it growing away from us? Is it growing across? Those two things can greatly affect not only the line the ball needs to travel on, but also the speed in which the putt must be hit to be hitting the hole.
So we've got to look at grain and slope.
Grain and slope.
Slope. Obviously, if it's downhill, the ball is going to roll faster. If it's uphill,
Right.
it's going to roll slower. If we're putting across the slope, let's say the right side is higher than the left side, then the ball is going to have a tendency to turn left. And if the left side is higher than the right, the ball is going to have a tendency to turn right. So we have to take in consideration the lay of the land if we're going to make that putt. And you said something about grain. Grain, if we kind of explain that to the viewers, grain is the way the grass grows. Grass is a plant. It has auxins in the stem. Auxins move away from sunlight and cause the plant to lay towards the sun. When it does that, for photosynthesis to occur, it's what we call, it causes the grain effect, because the plant is leaning into you or away from you depending on where the sun is, correct?
Correct.
So if I'm putting into the grain, where all the plant is coming into me and my ball's going into the grain, what will it do?
It's going to slow it down.
So it's going to slow the ball down. Thus, if I put down grain and the ball gets on top of that, it's going
It's going to speed it up.
speed it up. So just to let's just kind of go over it. First and foremost, line and speed. And we got to get it on the right line at the right speed if we want to make it.
Right.
That's pretty simple to understand. The two things that affect that are grain and slope. So people have to learn to look at the putting green, take a few extra minutes to kind of look at the grain and look at the slope, and that's going to give them the best opportunity to choose the right line and maybe to get the right speed and make a putt.
Why don't we show our guests here a demonstration of slope when we
Okay,
hit putt?
for
See
example,
what
slope.
happens.
We'll put a ball from over here. How about right here to
Okay.
that hole? Now, when you look at the green here, what we have is a slope from back to front. Everything is sloping this way. So it's going to affect that ball in such a way that the ball is going to try to move to John's right. Okay, so let's watch John putt a ball. And even though he putted it well left of the hole, the ball is turning back towards the right. Okay, now John got the right line there, but what was he missing?
A speed.
He needed the speed. So the same thing, if we look at the grain here, the grain really is kind of going this way at the moment. So John's going to try to putt this one more time now that he has a little bit better idea of what the grain is doing and the speed, and he's going to see if he can get this ball on the right line. Much better putt. So grain and slope definitely affect the way we putt a golf ball. Okay, when we're talking about grain, just a quick, you were a college golfer, as was I, so let's just give the players and the people viewing the video a quick idea of how to tell which way the grain is growing. What do you always do?
Well, the easiest way is just simply take a look at the coloration in the grass. If the grass appears very thick and dark green and lush, typically you'll be putting into the grain. If the grass towards the hole appears shiny and light, sometimes thin looking, you're going to be putting downgrade towards the hole.
Excellent. I mean, that, again, we want to keep this video simple, and I think that's pretty simple. Line and speed is important. Grain and slope affect the line and speed. We've told them that, and we've given them a little bit of idea how to tell or how to determine which way the grain is going. Now, let's just talk about the mechanics of putting briefly before we move on to the next thing. When we're talking about putting a ball, when we're talking about getting it on the right line, obviously, before you can get that ball on the right line, you've got to have a stroke that will start it on whatever line you choose.
Right.
How do you develop strokes with your students that are going to be able to get the ball on the right line?
Well, the good news about putting is it is somewhat more individualistic than the golf swing. You have a little bit more wiggle room as far as the mechanics go. However, we've got to find a way such that we can roll the ball on a consistent line, and that's what putting is really about. Once you develop a little bit of feel where you can roll at the right distance, you've got to develop a stroke that can consistently roll it on the right line, and there's many ways to do that. And in our book, you can go back and look in detail on what those ways are. But simply, if you can get, just like in your full golf swing, if you can master the grip, the setup, the posture, and more than anything, get them done consistently each time, you'll have very great success on the greens.
Excellent. So in your case, just a quick scenario, what
Okay.
would be the good mechanics that a putter would follow if he wanted to develop a putting stroke that was repetitive?
Once again, we'll always start with the grip. A couple things you want to do on the grip. Obviously, you've got to have your hands close together so one hand doesn't overpower the other. But most importantly, you want to put your hands in such a position that the palms are facing each other on the grip. And there's tons of different ways to do that. But once I get my palms facing on the grip, a couple of things happen. The first thing is it takes the wrists out of the stroke, which putting, as we all know, is a one-lever stroke, not to produce power, but to produce accuracy. The second thing I've got to do is I've got to make sure my hands are close together. And lastly, I want to make sure that my hands are working as a unit. And that's
Okay.
most important. So when I take my grip, I'll start with my feet together much as I would my full swing. I'll align my club face first. Most putters are equipped with either a dot, an arrow, or a straight line to show you where you're aimed. I'm going to put my top hand, for me, my left hand, on top of the club, and then my right hand on bottom. I personally will still interlock my fingers, but some people, like we said, there's many different ways for us to actually grip a club when we go out and putt. But I will keep my hands together. My palms will be facing each other. I'll take a small step with my front foot, a slightly bigger step with my back foot. My knees will be flexed. I'll be bent over from the waist. My arms will hang, and I'll be ready to go. I'll be in a relaxed position to putt.
In relationship to the ball, where would you say your eyes are? Inside that line or outside that line?
I would say my eyes are slightly inside the ball. There's a couple schools of thought as far as how to putt, but when you talk to most people want your eyes slightly inside of the ball. So if you had a golf ball there and a line straight across it, when I look down, my eyes would be slightly inside of that line as opposed to directly over the top of it, and definitely not on the outside of it.
Excellent. So if we were going to give our viewers a couple of putting drills here, why don't you give them a putting drill that will help them with line, and I'll give them a putting drill that will help them with feel.
Okay, simple putting drill to help you with line.
You grab a ball there, and I'll grab my putter.
Most golf balls are equipped with either a line. Some of them are even actually in the design, they have a line on them. If not, a lot of times you can just use the writing on the side of the ball to help yourself line up to the hole. And one way you can do that is you can take that writing or that line and you can squat down directly behind it, and you can line that line or the writing up to where you want the ball to go. And once I do that, I can step back and check it and say that it looks good. And then once I've done that, I can use this line on the top of my putter, or in this case, a dot, and I can line that up with the line that I've put into place. And simply, once I'm able to do that, I can try to roll it down to that line. And basically what that's taken is it's taken out a variable in one of the things we have to do to make a putt. I know I've got the right line because I've already set it up before I even hit the putt.
Excellent. Good. So long as you putt one with the line
Okay?
right.
Let's see what happens. See if we can get the right line. Okay, not too bad. Line
Not
was
too
pretty
bad.
good. Speed
Pretty
was a
good
little
putt.
off.
Okay, so that's a good, and I really think I'd like to see more people do exactly what John said there. Using that line is awesome. Sometimes people walk up to a ball, especially young people, and they set up to it and they never line the ball up. They feel that they can just look at the hole and will the ball into the hole. Using a line at least gives them a point of reference, and then they're freed up to make a stroke down the line that they've chosen, be it the right or the wrong line. And we don't always choose the right line. Okay, here's a drill that I like a lot. When you practice putting, one of the things that's hard to do is kind of emulate the pressure that we really feel when we're actually playing golf. And man, if you can't emulate that pressure, a lot of people putt and practice and chip well when there's no pressure on them. But when you have pressure, things are different. Don't you agree?
Mm-hmm.
So what I like to do is, and I know this sounds crazy, but we play a little game, especially on a putting green. And we're not on the putting green here, but if you were, there's 7 or 8 holes on the putting green. I always like to see a student start at hole number 1 and putt all the way around the putting green to every hole with a couple of simple rules. Rule number 1, you can't leave the ball short. So if you putt this and you're going to that hole, even if it was a good putt and it stops relatively close to the hole, because that's short of the hole, I would have to start over. The same thing is true if you put it down there, even if it's not short of the hole, and you putt it past and you don't make the putt coming back. In other words, if you 3-putt, you got to start over.
Why is one of my rules that I don't want to leave the ball short?
Well, to me, I mean, I went to Baylor, not A&M, but I'm pretty sure that 99% of every ball that's left short won't go in the hole.
Absolutely.
So a lot of things can be gained by rolling the ball past the hole. It also gives me an opportunity. It gave me a chance to make it, but it gives me an opportunity to see what the putt's going to do coming back, even if I miss it. So getting the ball to the hole is important, and by forcing myself in practice to get it to the hole, it puts a lot of pressure on me. Normally what will happen when people do this drill is they'll run it way by the hole, making sure they get it there, and then they've got to make that putt coming back, or they got to start over anyway. So it puts a lot of pressure on you. The second thing that I like to do is, and this really sounds crazy, I like to putt with the toe of the putter. You know, I can take a lot of young people and I give them a lesson, and in helping them develop feel, if I make them putt with the toe, all of a sudden they slow down, they concentrate, they pay attention, because the ball will go sideways if you don't hit it in the right place. So I always like to get them putting, doing that drill. Can't be short, you can't 3-putt, and you have to putt with the toe of the putter, and we just try to roll the ball down towards the hole. That is probably the best drill to make sure that we get the ball to the hole, that we focus on our line, and we focus on our speed.
Why is the rule in place that you can't 3-putt?
Or if I could three putt, then I might as well just come back over here and start over anyway. Because if I three putt, I've missed my goal of trying to make the lowest score on this hole that I can possibly
And I think the
make.
point that we're trying to make there is, while you don't want to leave a ball short because it doesn't have any chance to go in, you can't hit it so far past the hole in which you're going to be missing it regularly on the comeback putt. And that's what you've got to be careful with.
Exactly. So again, the main thing about putting, it's probably the most important part of the short game. Every hole, every score ends with a putt. So that's the last thing that we have, the last opportunity that we have to save a stroke is with a putt. And we're going to have that on every hole unless we hole one out from the fairway or from off the green. So putting is extremely important, and the way you get better at putting is simple. You practice. We got some good drills in the book, and if the students will go back and look at those drills and spend some time doing them, they'll become better putters, don't you think?
I think so.
All right, now we talked a little bit about putting. Let's go on over and let's talk a little bit about chipping. What do you say?
Okay, let's do it.